Hello everyone, welcome to another tutorial. This time I wanted to try to do an effect that is seen in Skyrim. It's that I don't really remember the name of this, but it's basically the effect when the main character screams like a dragon and projects everyone else and objects as well, just with the sheer force of the sonic wave. So I'm going to try to do this effect as well. My knowledge of particle effects is a bit limited, but let's see how this goes. So my idea is, I think what we want to do is throw something physically in front of us that is invisible, and this would leverage the Unreal physics engine. And I could do like a ball, like pushing everything in front of it as it gets projected, but that would probably mean that things would still be projected as the wave goes along. That's not what I really want to do. What I really want to do, I think, is when this ball, physics ball, intercepts any body, it will just apply an impulse to that body. This way it only affects it once as it passes by. And I think it probably looks a bit better and is more coherent with what they do in Skyrim, I think. So first things first, let's create a new blueprint class. Let's make it an actor, and let's call it BP Shockwave. If I can type. So what do we want here? I think we want to add a capsule collision. Here, let's make it the default just by dragging to the root, and let's maybe make it let's make this capsule 100 units high and 100 units of radius, so we make it a perfect sphere. And let's disable gravity. You could leave it enabled. The effect would just be that once you projected this, it would slowly drop. And I don't think this is what I want. I want to project really in front, which I think it's a bit neat. Let's also change the collision preset here. Let's change it to costume and make it collision enabled, query and physics. And let's leave it overlapping everything. So this will just generate events and will still behave as a normal physics object, even though it overlaps basically with everything else. So it doesn't physically collide. I'm just interested in the overlapping events, with other objects. So once we have this, let's see, we can already see how this would look like if it is in front of our player. Let's make it like this. So when we build, we don't see anything, but if we make it hidden, well, not hidden in game, then we see it here as we start. Okay, so another thing I want to do, let's just put this cube here. I think this is a BP cube, so let me just change this BP cube here really quick. Let's see what I want to do with this guy. Let me just add the box collider here. Box collision here, and I'm gonna make it the root as well. Oh, sorry, actually like this. And I want to make this box, let's simulate physics, and I want to make this box maybe 50 by 50 by 50, I guess. Yeah, perfect size, perfect match. And yeah, let's make it block all dynamic, just so it by default it blocks everything, and gravity is enabled, so that's all good. Yes, okay. So we have a box that we can test this on. Let me just move this. Ooh, if I can select it, let me just move this here, just so it's more or less in line, like this. Yeah, good. And might as well move my character as well a little bit, just so it's, let's make it like this so we can see what happens when we start. Now, what do I want to do? Let's see. I want to have this ball destroy itself after a certain time, because I want this effect to be temporary in front of me. So what I'm going to do here is on the event graph, as soon as the game starts for this object, which means as soon as it is spawned in the world, and it's going to happen for this guy that is already spawned in the world, and it's going to happen for any others that we spawn. What I want to do here is I want to set timer by function name, and I'm going to call a function to destroy it after a certain period of time. I'm just going to create this function. I'm going to call it kill, and the only thing I'm going to do here is destroy actor. That's it. Target is self, so it will destroy itself. And as for the time, let's just make it a variable, because I think it's a good practice to create variables for these things that can be used to configure the params of a certain instance. So let's just call it time to live, and it's basically the time that this effect will live for. Let's just make it maybe 2 seconds. Let's make it 2 seconds. So if I start this now, I should see this, and after 2 seconds it goes away, so it dies basically. That's perfect. So next up, what do I want to do? I want to let's see, let's get rid of this thing. I don't want to actor overlap. I want to use the capsule overlap. So let's do a neat trick here, and let's just go put this here, and now let's do bind event on component, bind event on component. Okay, let's do it differently. Let's grab the capsule and do a bind event on, why can't I? On component beginning overlap. That's what I want. Okay, so what I want to see here is every time this component, the capsule, gets this event triggered, the on component beginning overlap, I want to do a costume event here. I'm going to call it on capsule overlap, and this is just a way for us to write this code here on the actor, and basically whenever the component itself triggers this event, basically overlaps with something, we get this costume event triggered with all the options that come from there. So let's see, what do I want to do here? I want to do a couple of things. First one, I want to overlap with normal physics objects. So let's just do a branch here. And the condition I am going to ask is whether or not the other component is simulating physics. So if the other object is simulating physics, it means it's a normal physics object, and I just want to do one simple thing, which is add an impulse to this. So add an impulse not to the capsule, but to the other component. There you go. And the impulse I want to add is basically going to be get actor forward vector, and I want to take the vector where our actor is pointing to, and I want to multiply it by a force. Let's make it promote a variable and call it shockwave force. Right? And this is the impulse that I want to apply to my physics object. And one more thing I want to do, so I need to specify the default value for this shockwave force. Let's make it 1000. Now I'm going to put velocity change here. The only thing this does is it basically ignores the mass of the object. So, but we can experiment with it, but basically I want all objects to be affected the same way, which means that this is just going to immediately change the velocity of the object regardless of the mass. If we want mass to affect the power with which an object is struck, or the resulting force, then we can leave it off and then it will affect mass, but I can try both and then we'll see. So this should be it. Now the only thing I want to do now is, so this is not going to do anything because our shockwave is not actually moving. One thing I need to do is instantiate this and apply it some force, basically. And the way I'm going to do this is in the let's see. Okay, let's create a new function. Let's call it fire. And this function is going to be called by the character to fire a shockwave. And let's see what we want to do in this fire. We want to, same thing, we want to get the actor forward vector of the shockwave that is instantiated. We just need to make sure that we instantiate it in front of our character, and then it should be fine. The forward vector should be correct, should be the direction that we want to fire at. And let's multiply this by a certain amount, which is basically the velocity with which our shockwave is going to go. And then we add impulse. We add impulse to our capsule. And let's just line this up to be prettier. And this is the actual impulse. And let's do it a velocity change as well, because we don't really care about the mass of the shockwave. It's just a let's say it's just a placeholder for the effect, basically. Let's just make this guy also a variable to be a bit neater, and let's call it shockwave velocity. And let's give it I need to compile first. Let's give it a 5000 value. So if we call fire on our shockwave, basically it will be fired. So let's just simulate this and go into the event graph. And before everything else, we call fire. Let's see what happens. Nothing happens. Huh. Interesting. Let's see what I could be doing wrong here. Well, let's immediately go for the proper way to do this, which is the character instantiating the shockwave. So let's open the third-person character. And in my third-person character, because this is following other tutorials that I was doing, I already have some input actions set up. One of them is shoot, so I'll just grab the shoot from here, and I want to spawn actor from class. Let's just interrupt this maybe. I'm thinking if I want to do this or not. Yeah, let's not do the line trace. This was for the else system. Let's just ignore this for now. So I want to spawn the BP shockwave. Ooh. If I can type. going to instantiate a new actor called BP Shockwave, and I'm going to split this struct so I can specify the transform parameters one by one, and I want to spawn this, like, let's say 1 meter in front of our character. So I'm going to get actor transform. I'm going to split this up as well. I want to spawn this at the same rotation of the character. I want to have the scale 1, 1, 1, 1. And I want to get the actor forward vector again. I want to multiply this by the distance from the character that I want to spawn it at, let's say 1 meter. And I'm going to add this to the current location of our character. And this is the spawn location for the shockwave. So we spawned the shockwave, and now I want to do a branch. So I want to make sure that this is valid, and I don't need a branch actually. So I just want to check if this is valid. And if it's not valid, I'm going to do a delay of 0.1 seconds. This is just to prevent trying to fire while there's some things with physics, sometimes it doesn't really work that well, and I just want to make sure that the object is actually valid when I apply the fire function, because I think that was kind of messing up some shockwaves sometimes. But anywho, you can try without this and just use the value provided. So I just want to go here and call the fire function. So if it is valid, I call the fire function. There you go. So one final thing, I'm going to remove this guy from the world, and I'm going to give it a run. So it does spawn in front of the player, it's just not moving. And I have to check why that is. So if I go to my capsule, I see that I set it to collision enable query physics, generate overlaps and world dynamic, and it should in principle be all fine. Let me check. We are simulating, oh, we're not simulating physics. Oh yeah. So that was it, I think. Let's play again. Fire, and I can see something going. Yeah, I can definitely see something going. I think it's just very fast and we don't really have a reference for it, but it is affecting the physics objects. So I fire it and it does affect the physics objects. Cool. So let's do one more thing now. I want to make this a bit more visible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a particle system to this. And I'm just going to add a particle system component to this. And I don't have one right now, but I want to create one. And I think I'll add the starter content to this so we can have like the default particle systems and all that. So I'll do add new feature or content pack starter content, and I'll add it to the project. There. So now blueprints, I'm going to create a new particle system. I'm going to call it PS Shockwave. Fantastic. I'm going to open. I'm just going to do, there's a thing called, geometry. So you can see it here a little bit better. And now, like I said, my knowledge of particle systems is not that fantastic. let's see if we can do this. Let's see if we can do something to this. So I'm gonna use the mdust particle here, and we can see we have already something. Let's see. What else do I want here from the required? Probably nothing. I think this is all fine. I'm going to go to the spawn, and in the spawn I want to do this rate distribution float constant. Let's do 200 so we spawn a lot more. And the rate scale, let's make it, yeah, it's 1, it's fine. Okay, let's go with the burst scale. Can also probably change this one. Let's make it 10 maybe, so we have quite a lot more. And yeah, okay, that looks good. Lifetime should be fine, I think. Yeah, initial size, initial velocity. Okay, let's change a bit the initial size. Let's make it distribution vector constant, and let's make it 50. 50. Yeah, that's better. Bigger. Initial velocity, let's make it a bit faster. I think start, let's make it actually a bit slower. Let's make it 50 here. And the start radial velocity doesn't really matter. Now let's add a new emitter here. Let's do an orbit emitter, just so we have kind of this ring effect to it. Let's make the offset amount, let's try 75, 25. Yeah, let's see how that goes. And finally, let's do a size scale, and let's just make it a bit bigger. So 5, 5, and 5. Okay, let's see how that goes on the viewports. Oh, we need to select our particle system, and okay, that might work. We might have to adjust the opacity of it, but let's see. That looks better. Yeah, that looks good, I think. I'll just adjust the opacity a little bit because I don't really like. Let's do alpha over live, and let's start with, yeah, instead of starting with 1, let's start with 0.3. So it starts really transparent and goes into full transparent then. Yes, that looks much better. Now we can see the objects, and we also see the effect. That's great. So one final thing I want to do in this tutorial is I want to affect this guy as well, right? I don't want to just affect objects in the scene. I want to affect as well characters. And the way we can do this is, well, there's a couple of things that we need to do. One is we need to set the mesh on the third-person character to ragdoll by default. And we can do this by going to the character and selecting the mesh. And somewhere down here we have collision presets. We can just set ragdoll. Now this doesn't affect anything. Our character, as you can see, I can still walk, the animation still play, everything still works. Now the only difference is if I now set simulate physics to true on my object, it will behave as a ragdoll and not fall through the floor. If you let it as it would just fall through the floor. That's not what we want. So that's one thing. And now another thing is the shockwave actually needs to handle characters as well, because this immediately asks if the actor is simulating physics or not, and the third person character is not simulating physics by default. Neither do we want it to be, because we want to play animations. And so now one thing I want to do is test if this is a character or not. But I want to do this a bit cleaner. So this is all handling normal inanimate objects. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to create a couple of functions. One function is going to be named overlap objects, let's say. Well, let's just call it effect objects. And another one is going to be called effect characters. And one thing I want to do in both cases is I want to have an input which is the component, and it's going to be an actor component. This is basically, it's going to be a reference to an object, and this is basically what is being affected. So basically I should see what happened here. Oh, interesting. Is this a bug? Huh. I was editing the input of another function. Strange. Anywho, component, actor component, done. So both functions accept this component. And in the, let's get rid of the fire. And the event graph, I just want to do affect objects, and I pass in the other component. And then I'm going to do affect characters, and I'm going to pass in the other component. That's it, much cleaner. And now I just take all of this, get rid of it, cut, and affect objects is going to get all this code here, which is basically a branch that checks if this guy, scene component object reference, needs to be a scene component. That's interesting. Okay, let's make it a scene. Scene what? Scene component. Scene component reference. Yeah, okay, cool. And then we primitive component object reference. Yeah, it needs to be a primitive component actually, so we can apply the force to it. So primitive component reference. Done. Yes, so this should affect objects. So in principle, if I run this, it should still affect this guy. Yes, perfect. And now for the other one, what I want to do is, well, let's make this guy a primitive component as well. But I also want to have, well, maybe I think I can do a get owner maybe. Yes. And this gives me the actor, so I don't need to pass another input to this function to test if the guy is a character or not. So now what I want to do is, I forgot something. It's actually good practice to always return on the functions. So I'm going to do I'm going to do a return node here just for completion. And this guy, I'll just add a return node here as well. So first thing I want to do is I want to test if the owner of this component is actually a third person character or not. So I'm going to do a cast to third person character. And if the cast fails, I want to return immediately. So I don't do anything if the cast fails. Means it's not a character, I don't care about it. If the cast does work, then one thing I want to do is get the mesh component, because I don't want to affect the capsule collider that the third person character has. I want to affect the mesh itself, so the collider around the mesh, and that's why I'm doing this and not applying this to the component that we got in. Which means that, and there's another thing I want to do. I want to, this component, which is going to be the capsule component, I want to disable physics on it once we get hit, or I want to disable the collision, just so, because the capsule collision is going to stay on the same spot when the ragdoll mode is enabled, but I'll show you and see what I mean. Okay, so one thing I don't want to do before all this is I don't want to affect my own character with this. I just want to affect other characters. So first thing I'm going to do is check if this guy is equal to the get player character 0, which is going to be me because we are running this in single player mode. And if these guys are the same, it means I'm trying to apply the force to my own character, and that's not what I want. So if they are the same, I just return. If they are not the same, then I want to get the mesh, and I want to set the mesh to set simulate physics true, and it's now in ragdoll mode. So let's give this a try just for fun. So it is working. So it just set as simulating physics, sets the ragdoll mode. And now I want to apply the impulse to our character. So I'll just grab this again and I'll add impulse. There you go. Oops. And I think this guy requires a bit more input than the normal objects. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the shockwave force value that we set. I'm going to multiply it by 10. And I also want to get the forward vector of the actor. Okay, forward vector, and I want to multiply this by this value. I should do this the other way around, just so it's prettier. Yes, yes, yes. And this is the impulse, and it's also velocity change. We don't want to take into consideration mass. We could, but we don't want to. So with all this done, it should work. I should just be able to push this guy, and I did. And now you notice that when I try to walk here, I still have the capsule collider of this guy in front, because it's still there. If I go to the third person character and I make this not hidden in game, you're gonna see what I mean. So there's the capsule collider. When I push him, I'm just pushing the mesh, so the capsule collider is not affected. And one thing I want to do, I just want to deactivate this guy. And since in principle in our game the guy would be dead, the capsule collider doesn't really matter anymore. If we wanted it to matter anymore, let's say he's not dead, he needs to get up again, then we would need to actually make sure the capsule collider is in the right place when it gets up, and it's coherent with the mesh and all that. But I'm not going to do that now. Just for simulation purposes, this is okay. So I add an impulse, and now what I want to do is I want to take the component that we have, which is going to be the capsule component. Let me just set this to a variable here, promote to local variable, just so it's easier for us to reference this. I'm just going to call it, why can't I name it? Oh, let's just say this is the components. Let's say a component. You can name it whatever you want, but anywho. So I'll just take the a component and I'll do set collision enabled, no collision. That's it. So now if I run this, the collider should not matter anymore, the capsule collider, and it just works. So I can keep, oh, I can't affect this guy anymore. Why is that? Huh. I think I made a mistake somewhere. So, oh, I know why. So the thing is, what's happening here is that the shockwave is affecting the, it's calling the overlap effect on event on the capsule collider, and as soon as the collider is not collision enabled anymore, it doesn't affect anymore. So basically the mesh collider is not responding to this. And what I want to do is I need to go to the third person character, and I want to go to the mesh, and I need to set the mesh to t. Well, one thing I want to do is generate overlap events. I think that's what I want. I want this mesh to also generate the events. Let's see. Oh, now now it's not affecting it. That's so interesting. Okay. I think I missed something here. Let me take a look at my notes. It should in principle generate the events as well. Is it because I'm adding the impulse to the wrong one? I'm setting the simulate physics on the mesh itself, and this is only if the character is different. And interesting. And now neither of them are. So let me try to disable this again, the generate overlapping effects events. Why do I keep saying effects? So now it works, which means that oh, but this guy is not simulating physics, so it doesn't. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I think, I don't know what to think. It should work, but it's not working. So I'm calling the effect objects, and I'm calling the effect characters. Okay, I think I know what's wrong. Let's try this the other way around. And let's break this here. Affecting the characters first. No, not triggering. That's interesting. So let's try to debug it. Okay. Direct component. Yeah. Set simulating physics. Okay. So let's try to debug this. Affect characters. Let's see. When we affect a character, let's do a print string here. And let's see this guy. Get display name. And let's print the display name of the thing that we are triggering. In this case, we got the static mesh. And in this case, we got the collision cylinder and the character mesh. So the character mesh is getting the collision. It's just that the force is not being applied to it. Well, actually both the collision are getting affected. But set collision enable not collision. Let's take this guy out of the... Yeah, now I got it. I wonder if I'm setting the collision enabled A component. A component is the... Oh! I'm doing this to both. Yeah, I know what's wrong now. Yeah, I know what's wrong. So I'm not going to do this to the A component because otherwise I'm doing this also to the mesh component. I'm actually going to get the... From the third person character, I'm going to get the capsule collision or component, and I'm just going to disable that one and not the other one. So otherwise I'm completely disabling the collision on the mesh, and that's not what I want. That's going to fail for sure because then it's not going to register the physics inputs. Yeah, so now it's okay and I can pass through them. Yeah, and now I can apply every time I can shoot this guy and send him to smithereens. Yes, this is so much. This is so satisfying. Let's just, for the heck of it, let's add a bit more of these here. Yeah, let's add more. And also add a few more of these guys. And now let's shoot everyone in the scene. There you go. There you go. Fun, fun, fun. There you have it, guys. How to do the Skyrim shockwave kind of effect. I hope you learned a little bit. I hope you had fun. And I'll see you next time.